Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 10 of season 1. This is the final episode of He's a Porn Addict, Now What? The podcast featuring my good friend, co-author, best-selling author. How many books do you have now, Josh?
Four that under my name, although I've written a lot under other names for
ghostwriting? All right. I want to talk to you about that sometime. I think that'd be kind of fun. But 4-time award-winning author Joshua Shea and myself. So this is the last episode of season 1. And Josh and I were talking off record that it's been a joy. The feedback has been amazing, and I think we have enough questions that I think we could even start a whole other podcast on the questions we've got about the questions that we read. And I think that's meta, as the kids say.
Yes. That's you're ripping the fabric of time by doing that.
That's a good point. So I would rather not do that. So let's get to the question. And it is, if you're following along in the book, it's the first question of chapter 2, but then it is the 10th episode, the last episode of season 1. Here we go. Understanding and coping with feelings of betrayal. So this is going to get a lot into betrayal trauma, which Josh is certified in as a life coach. And then I've done a significant amount of training as a therapist in. And so I think that this chapter is going to be pretty powerful. So let's dive right in. The question is, how did he manage to conceal it all so well and deceive me for such a long time? So Josh, what did you say?
Well, as the person who's the former pornography addict and has been there, I said, my wife was under the impression I looked at porn once in a while. She was never a prude and believed an occasional glance at porn was just something that guys do. Unfortunately, she had no idea the extent to which I watched, nor the reasons for my use, which put me far into the addict category. I've been a porn addict since the very first time I saw hardcore pornography at 12 years old. By the point I met my wife, around 15 years later, I knew how to hide my porn use from my parents, girlfriends, roommates, friends, and every other human I came in contact with. Hiding my use from my wife was never a challenge, nor did it ever feel like a deceitful behavior because I'd been doing it for so long. When I reached the most critical stage of my porn addiction, I had sunk to such lows, including communicating with women in chat rooms, that even if I wanted to come clean about my behavior, the potential cost of disclosure seemed too great. I thought she would leave if I told her what was happening. If you're a typical partner in what you believe is a healthy relationship, your life is not consumed by what your husband or boyfriend is doing when you're not around. Even if you have relationship problems, pornography addiction is not one of those things that we're programmed to look for in our partners. It's easy to hide what the other person is not looking for. Have you ever noticed the moon in the sky in the middle of the day? It's almost always there, but you really don't see it unless you're actively looking for it. Were you actively looking for a pornography addiction? I know my wife was not. I had enough other issues on the surface that she needed to deal with. Spending the time and energy to dig deep and look for things that weren't obvious was not something that she did. The revelation that he successfully hid this from you for a long time should not make you feel like you weren't paying enough attention. It should not make you feel stupid or ignorant. It should not make you feel like you were played for a fool. He hid his behavior because he knew you would not approve and that it would hurt you. He likely also felt a great amount of shame using it to meet whatever gap it filled in his mind, body, and soul. This doesn't excuse the behavior, but hopefully once you can internalize this, you'll realize the bigger question is why he needed it in the first place.
Man, that is a good description of what I see in my office. And I love the analogy of the moon in the sky in the middle of the day. That's something I'm going to go look for today because I've never really looked for that. And for people that have bought that bonus episode, I think it was the last one or the one before, and I talked about this concept of confabulation, you might start to recognize. It's a doozy of a story, but you might recognize the concepts around what we talked about with confabulation too. If I think the wife in this scenario is gonna, I mean, it can't be like if he couldn't be doing that. So they're going to create almost a narrative or look for the ways that that's not happening versus the ways that it would be.
I can speak for myself in that my alcoholism was so much more obvious.
Yeah.
Looking for porn addiction would have been like looking for gambling addiction, which I don't have, or looking for video game addiction, which I don't have.
Yeah.
So, did I ever play video games? Sure. Did I ever go to a casino? Sure. Did I ever look at porn? Sure. But she wasn't looking for all of that stuff because I was coming home drunk almost every night. That was the problem. And I was driving as well most of the time. So that was really the problem. And, she had relatives in her past who had issues with drinking, who had OUIs, who had lost their license, who had done jail time. And so for her, there was an actual element of PTSD when it came to my drinking, and especially my driving while drinking. So I know that, okay, so he looked at porn once this month, big deal. I have to make sure he's not on the road driving because he's going to kill somebody. And when as you know, I was a well-known person in my community, and she would always drive home the point. Well, what happens if the city councilor gets caught drunk driving? What happens if the big magazine publisher gets caught drunk driving? You're going to lose advertisers. You're going to lose voters. You're going to lose all of this stuff. So she was so focused on the alcohol when it came to me that I was watching pornography every day, sometimes more than once a day. And she never had any idea of it because there was this other thing that was just like a beacon just screaming. It's like a lighthouse on a rock. Meanwhile, there's another rock right over on the side that you don't notice because there's no lighthouse on it.
Yeah. And so were you, did the shame of the drunk driving or the drinking problem, did it feed into the porn addiction, or do you feel like that was just something that you just did? It wasn't that.
Yeah. You know what? At the time, I don't think that I even really understood that my porn addiction was an addiction. Gotcha. I knew that I used it. I knew that I needed it. Had I stopped and thought about it, I probably would have recognized it much more as an addict, but I wasn't looking for it either. I had too much other stuff going on in my life. Why am I trying to go find addictions that I know I had a problem with alcohol? And I knew that at the end of the day, once everybody had gone to sleep, once all of the social events were done, once all of my professional endeavors, everything was caught up, that was my chance to sit back, pour a big tumbler of tequila, even though I knew that was a problem, but I was home, so it was okay. I could pour a big tumbler of tequila and then sit back and enjoy the pornography, or I could sit back and watch TV, or I could sit back and read.
Say, Josh, would you feel like it was something that you felt like you had deserved, or was it a hide in the dark, shameful coping mechanism?
It was a hide in the dark, shameful coping mechanism that I had rationalized was just a relaxing activity for me.
Okay. And so you basically had to confabulate that story. Yeah, you had to kind of make it. I'm not going to look at
porn during the day. So this is my opportunity to look at porn. I have earned this to a degree.
Yeah.
This is my chance to calm down and settle down. But more importantly, I want to hear what you wrote before.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Here we go. Okay. Me, the mental health professional. So the question again, how did he manage to conceal it all so well and deceive me for such a long time? You may have just found out, but more than likely there have been years of this pattern of behavior on his part that have led to either his disclosure or your discovery. And during these years, there's undoubtedly been a tremendous amount of guilt and shame on his part. Guilt can be a good emotion because it can cause someone to evaluate a situation and motivate them to do something different. But when shame kicks in, it's that voice that tells you you're a horrible person and you'll never overcome this. People are going to know you're a fraud or you're disgusting if they ever find out about this. Pornography is the type of addiction that for most individuals is laced with guilt and shame, evolving into an addiction fueled by isolation because they don't want anyone to know anything about it. In my practice, I can't count the number of times I've had a couple in front of me and the wife, who has no idea about her husband's use, says something like, "My friend Tina caught her husband Bob looking at pornography. I can't believe guys look at that. It's so disgusting. She kicked him out. And if that ever happened to me, I'd do the same thing." Even if he wanted to disclose his use at this time, he's hearing a message that his addiction is going to end his marriage. He's going to have to leave. His life as he knows it will be over. All of this leads to even more guilt and shame, which will just lead to more isolation. For him, concealing has been part of a routine. When I work with clients trying to break pornography addiction, oftentimes we're trying to break the routine, which has been solid and foolproof for years. Most men have a mental checklist as part of their routine. Make sure she's gone, lock the door, close the blinds, make sure the phone is nearby. There's also a routine for when he's finished, and neither are haphazard. They are methodical about things. They craft a world where they can do this and nobody is going to know. As the addiction grows, they may get more extreme with things like burner phones or installing apps to hide their behavior. The depth of guilt and shame associated with this addiction have caused him to work diligently to keep it hidden from you. So I think it's kind of on the same page of what you were saying, that you get really good at hiding it. And it's interesting because I can even say yesterday that I had someone, the wife, that was saying, yeah, I've asked him and he said no. And I just think, well, of course he's going to say no. And then when he says no, then he gets to take a little breather, and now the heat is off of having to hide. Or I even feel like he's being rewarded of, okay, my hiding is good, so it's working. Do you feel like that's the case?
Absolutely. And like I said, how did he manage to conceal it all so well? It wasn't even really that I was actively thinking about concealing it, because here's what I always tell my clients who are betrayal trauma, 99% of the time women. I always give my own example of, I became an addict at 12 years old. I met my wife when she was 26. And like I said there, if I can learn to hide, and this was back when pornography was a stack of Playboy magazines, when it was a box of bulky videotapes. It's not like today where you can just hide it on a phone, nice and easy, or you don't even have to hide anything. You just keep going to the same websites. For me, I had to actually hide material in my house. And if I can hide a couple boxes of material from my mom for 6 or 7 years, how is it that I'm not going to be able to hide what's on a computer from somebody who I meet 12, 14 years later? It wasn't even, to me, really a concealing game. It wasn't a deceit game. Everybody was in bed. I was looking at the computer. It wasn't even a challenge. It wasn't like, I didn't feel like, the evil villain with the mustache and, I'm hiding this from everybody. It was just
what it felt like to be you. You just did it.
This is just part of my day. This is just what I do. And it wasn't a feather in my cap that I did hide it. I do know about the burner phones, like you mentioned. I do know about people having apps and hiding, items within items within items.
Yeah.
I never had to do that to hide it from my wife, because, again, she wasn't looking for it. And that's the thing that I really want to drive home with this episode that we're doing. And we'll get more into it in the bonus episode. But, don't beat yourself up over something you're not looking for. You just don't know about what's going on in someone's head. You just don't know what's going on when they're not around. I've always found it funny where wives are scared to death when their husbands go away on business trips. And, he could cheat on me. He can cheat on you every day of the week if he really wants to, right in your own home. And, it's just a matter of being deceitful enough, being able to hide it enough. And it's not hard to do that kind of stuff. So beating yourself up over not seeing what largely a professional gaslighter is hiding from you.
It's funny, Josh. I remember a long time ago, I was taking notes in therapy sessions of how creative people got about or hiding things. And it was after one person in particular had shared a way that they accessed pornography through. It's one of the most creative ways ever. And I will take it to my grave, I think, because as I started writing these examples down, I thought at one point I'm going to do an episode where I talk about all the various ways that people get around things, and almost like as an awareness. But then I thought, I'm writing a playbook is what I'm doing.
I was going to say that's a DIY, because I can tell you, as far as YouTube saying that there's no pornography,
right?
That's not true if you can speak foreign languages, and things like that. And early on, I'll tell you this one quick because it doesn't exist anymore.
Okay.
But I know a guy, I met him in my rehab, who used Google Earth in the early days.
Okay. That's one of them that's on my list. Yeah.
You could go to some of these famous nude beaches, and you could zoom in, or because the car would be driving right by the beach or whatever. I don't know exactly how it worked, But I was told that you could, on Google Earth in the early days,
Yep.
absolutely find nudity. And that was a way around it. And then when your wife, asked you what you were doing, oh, I'm just looking at places to go on vacation, trying to
That
figure
was,
out what
I
we're gonna
literally
do.
had that, Josh. I mean, I don't think I talked to the guy of yours in rehab. So it shows that that's, I mean, there were people that had, they were sharing longitudes and latitudes even. So they would have a document where it was just numbers. And then one of the guys I talked to at one point, that was, it was interesting because that was, I mean, he always said, well, if she ever looks at that, I threw a couple of plus and minus signs. I threw a word, a PW by it, looked like password. And then it would just, I could get my way out of that, but then that itself was buried so far in this document an online document full of, I think just things to know about the house and stuff. So he almost hid it in plain sight and then made it look like it would just be something, that would make sense. So it's crazy.
Yeah. Make it look like it makes sense. And then if anybody ever questions you, well, it makes perfect sense.
Like you said to a professional gaslighter, I mean, it's like, please, I mean, allow me to sharpen my skills. That, that's the challenge. Okay. So I think we've got some pretty incredible things to talk about on today's bonus episode. So we're going to get more into the concepts of guilt and shame. And then I think that we were both saying we have some pretty good examples of, maybe we do share a couple more of those examples, not ones that are going to be the DIY, but maybe some just to allude to the fact of how creative people have gotten.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, like I said, I got to the point where I think I knew the word naked in like 9 languages, including what is Russian? Is that Cyrillic or whatever it is? I could actually draw out the characters for that. That's where an ill mind goes. That's where a sick person goes. When people are like, what's the difference between a casual user and an addict? Dude, learning Russian is probably the difference between
I think that's safe to say. I think that is safe to say. All right. So everybody, thank you. The end of season 1. I can't wait for season 2 to start. It's just around the corner. And as a reminder, you can go back and purchase any of the bonus episodes. And man, you're welcome to pick and choose them. But we're spinning gold each and every time.
Well, and if you like spoilers, you can always go buy the book as well.
Yeah. Exactly. He's a porn addict. Now what? An expert and a former addict to answer your questions. So, Josh, I'll catch you over on the bonus episode.
Yes, sir. I'll see you there.
All right. We'll see you then.